All right, this comes as Democrats right now are pinning their hopes tonight on this man, Hasan Piker, the left's biggest influencer. In fact, 7.5 million people tuned into his live stream on election night. 7.5 million. So who is he? And is he getting young men to swing left? Donie O'Sullivan went and talked to him, and he is out front.
Donie O'Sullivan.
This is Hasan Piker.
This is my dog, Kaya. I thought you legitimately were going to work out.
I could do some weights.
He's a social media superstar with almost 3 million followers on the video streaming platform Twitch.
They're eating the pets.
So this is that whole masculinity thing people are talking about, huh?
And he's part of a growing group of streamers and podcasters reaching young men online, a space Trump tapped into to reach young male voters.
Punch in, then you won't be able to see that he's not doing any weights.
But Hasan is not a Trump supporter. He's a progressive, a fan of Bernie and AOC. The Democratic Party even invited him to the DNC in August.
One thing we've been hearing for weeks now is that the left needs a Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I don't think that the Democratic Party can podcast itself out of this issue. Joe Rogan, he endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2020. Maybe they should do an autopsy on why he left the party.
Yeah, I've heard you say when it comes to stuff that guys like, you seek that stuff out online, whether it's watching a streamer, whether it's watching guys talking about working out and fitness. You say that the right wing just dominates that space.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I think that's why I started on Twitch, right? I know for a fact that the video game space is like people who consume this culture, people who are a part of this culture are not all right wing. I wanted to showcase to people that like, no, you can be a progressive person, you can be a leftist and like have fun at the same time.
How many people were watching your live stream on election night?
The total unique number was 7.5 million.
There's a general sense that when it comes to the world of podcasts, alternative media, I don't even know what you want to call it, that Trump did a much better job with that than Democrats and Harris.
Absolutely. I think that's true. When I saw the Aiden Ross collab, I thought, this doesn't have emotion. It was awkward. It was weird. But then I saw Trump on Theo Vaughn, and he started talking about cocaine. And I was like, uh-oh. This humanizes him.
So you're way up with cocaine more than anything else you can think of.
Cocaine will turn you into a damn owl, homie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Harris did consider going on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
But she didn't. What is it that the Democrat Party has to do differently?
Well, I think that they need to change their policies.
It's a policy thing.
Yes, it's 100% a policy thing. Which is the boring answer. Although it would be very self-serving for me to say, I'm the left's Joe Rogan, the Democratic Party should give me millions of dollars. That's not going to solve this problem. What will solve this problem is if the Democratic Party actually adopts real left-wing economic populist messaging instead of purposefully avoiding that stuff because they're terrified of upsetting their corporate donors. I think Trump speaks to male insecurities better, and I think Trump speaks to the anger that people have, whereas the other side of the political spectrum does not speak to that anger at all.
There's been a lot of controversy around you.
Yes.
The way you talk about Israel is viewed by some as anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Are you anti-Semitic?
Of course not. The real problem here is that I'm an anti-Zionist. The real problem here is that I'm extremely critical of Israel and all of the information that's readily available, especially on social media for so many people that don't necessarily rely on mainstream media any longer to get their information. And that's why you see this generational gap. If you're over the age of 35, you're still operating on the old boundaries. You're like, no, Israel's the most moral democracy in the Middle East, maybe in the world, right? And I think that the major generational divide that is, I think, in a very damaging way, feeding into the mistrust overall that people have with mainstream news in general, is coming from that.
Donie O'Sullivan, CNN, Los Angeles.
Yeah, it was just so thoughtful and important to hear that. Ken Martin is out front. He is running to be the next chair of the DNC. He's the current chairman of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. And I really appreciate your time, Ken. So, you hear Hasan Piker. 7.5 million people watched him on an election night. He's all in as a Democrat. But then he's talking to Donie about how the video game and fitness space online is dominated by right-wing people talking about it, right? Not necessarily everyone into fitness, right? That there's that gap. And he says that Trump speaks to male insecurities better. He speaks to the anger that people have, and that Democrats don't speak to that anger at all. I'm quoting Hasan here. He's very direct about the problem. Do you agree with him?
Well, first off, Erin, thanks for having me on tonight. And actually, I think Hasan's right in most of what he says there, and particularly as it relates to the fact that the Republicans have been, since the 2020 election, a constant drumbeat of misinformation, disinformation, and lies on platforms that the Democratic Party really wasn't competing in. We live in a 24/7, 365-day information environment now that we have to be competing in a much better way. Podcasts, streaming services, TikTok, social media, of course. My two boys, 22 and 20, they get their information from TikTok, right? And so we have to start realizing that we have to be where the voters are. That's half the battle, of course. And I do think we also have to use micro-influencers like Hasan and others who are already trusted validators and messengers in these spaces to help push these messages out and to have conversations with voters and people who are feeling frustrated and angry and left behind. You see, when we send people into these spaces, it tends to be politicians or talking heads. People like Hasan have deep influence and certainly have a voice and a following.
So, there has been a lot of focus, and he sort of touches on that because he's talking about the dominance of right-wing voices in very male spaces like video games or fitness. And there has been, though, broadly speaking, Ken, so much focus right now, and as you're looking to run the DNC, this is at the center of it, on whether the Democratic Party needs to move aggressively away from certain social positions like DEI, right? Or from issues where Democrats certainly seem to be in this election and certainly were successfully branded as much to the left of American voters. For example, Kamala Harris's support of taxpayer-funded surgeries, transgender surgeries for illegal migrants. The heads of the Trump and Harris campaigns see the impact of that issue, of that now famous ad, very differently. I wanted to play each of them for you.
We targeted black men, Hispanic families, white families, suburban women. We ran that ad everywhere because it also got to the point about boys and girls locker rooms, which suburban moms don't like. So,
listen, I will say that will go down as one of the most ruthlessly effective negative ads in the history of presidential politics.
This trans ad was not driving vote. There's a belief that if only we had responded to this trans ad with national and huge battleground state ads, we would have won. I don't think that's true.
So, Ken, how do you see it? One of the most ruthlessly effective negative ads in all of history, or this trans ad was not driving the vote, even if they'd responded to it more effectively, they wouldn't have won. Which point of view is right?
Well, I don't know which point of view is right. What I do know is we don't have to abandon our values here. We can stand up for the oppressed and marginalized and people who are being pushed out of this conversation, while also at the same time centering this conversation around people's economic pain and their frustrations with what was happening in this country these last several years. It's not about left or right to me. It's about making sure we focus squarely on a working class agenda that centers the struggles of this multiracial, multi-generational working class that is feeling left behind, that's working harder than they ever have before, that's struggling to get ahead and feeling like no one gives a damn about their lives. At the end of the day, that's the thing that unites all parts of our broad coalition in the Democratic Party, and we need to focus back on basics here, right? But at the same time, we do not need to abandon our values. We will stand up and protect and fight for people who are being pushed out of this conversation in this country and bullied and attacked like we see in Congress right now.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time. Ken Martin, as I said, chairman of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. And I know, sir, you are running to run the DNC. And that decision for the Democratic Party is going to be crucial. So much is at stake. So thank you for your time.